I caught my wife cheating at her summer writing workshop, so I hired a PI, got evidence, and disappeared without a trace before she returned. I go by Andrew Baker, but my buddies call me AB, never Andy. There's always some annoying drunk or ignorant guy who tries to act too familiar and calls me Andy, so I let them know. Andy? Not Mead. What's your job? They ask. I respond, I create this cool little gadget that cops can use from 40 feet away to check for drunk people. They've even started attaching them to radars around town. That usually shuts them up. But in case you haven't figured it out yet, that gadget isn't real. It's clear that I have little patience for foolishness. Lie to me and things get worse. I'm a simple guy, not complex at all. I enjoy a straightforward life and find satisfaction in my work. I work as an engineer for a large national company with offices all over the country. I have friends, and while I'm not a heavy drinker, I do enjoy the occasional beer. Honestly, I lean more towards nachos, but that's my battle. If I let it get out of control, I'll gain weight, so I make an effort to stay in decent shape for my age. I used to go sailing every chance I got, but having a wife and 2 young daughters takes up a lot of time. Eventually, I sold the boat. That was just one of the compromises I willingly made over the years, so I could have quality time with the people who really matter to me. I've been happily married to Karen for 25 years. She's a high school teacher. Our 2 daughters are now in college. Claire is studying at Brown University in Rhode Island, and her younger sister, Denise, is attending Boston University. I probably couldn't afford those expensive schools, but luckily, the girls are dedicated students and secured impressive scholarships. Our home is in North Carolina, specifically an area known as the Research Triangle. It's centered around some excellent universities in Raleigh and is surrounded by top-notch high-tech companies. Living and working here is wonderful. I could tell you about Carolina barbecue, but it would just make me hungry. I was somewhat disappointed when the girls opted for colleges up north, but I understand they needed to explore beyond their comfort zones, and that's ultimately a positive thing. Our daughters are amazing, intelligent, funny, charming young women with strong moral values. I worry about their safety daily, but I trust their decision-making. Witnessing them grow up and take their initial steps toward independence meant that my wife and I could finally have some time for ourselves again. I had been looking forward to this stage for a while. With both girls away at college, I imagined returning home every evening to a loving wife who would focus her attention on me and vice versa. I pictured us rekindling our connection, leading to days filled with happiness. It was almost like being newlyweds once more. We could enjoy dinners out, attend plays and movies, and finally rediscover each other the way I had always wished. However, reality didn't unfold exactly as I had envisioned. To be honest, looking back on that first year of having an empty nest, I noticed Karen undergoing changes. It seemed like her interests were shifting. While the shift was gradual, it became more evident with time. Initially, I thought these changes were her way of flourishing now that our daughters were no longer living with us. However, I eventually realized that what I was observing was a significant transformation in her values and priorities. Karen is an English teacher specializing in creative writing. To be fair, she's also a frustrated writer. As a young mother and teacher, she never really had the chance to write as she wanted. During the summer, and whenever she could spare an hour or two, Karen dedicates time to writing. But so far, not much has come of it. She used to send her essays and short stories to literary magazines, only to accumulate a collection of rejection letters. The grand masterpiece she hoped for never materialized. I'll admit, I do enjoy reading her writing, but as a writer, she's never gone beyond formulaic and sometimes overly dramatic stories. She has a romanticized notion of what a writer should be, and secretly, I suspect she's more attracted to the idea of being a writer than the actual writing. Nevertheless, if she's content, then I'm content too. Throughout most of our marriage, Karen has been a member of various writing groups. These are gatherings of people who come together to help each other by providing critiques, suggestions, and discussions on their work, aiming to improve each other's writing. Some of these groups have seemed genuinely productive to me, while others appear to be more like clubs of mutual admiration. Her last group, which was the one she belonged to when things fell apart, had elements of both. They took turns meeting at each other's homes, and during their meetings here, I'd try to give them space. I attempted to participate once, but Karen and a few others disapproved, so I stopped trying. Karen's current writing group consists of around 10 members, including both men and women. I'm fond of some of them, while others I could do without. Half of them are rather unremarkable, and the other half leave a strong impression when you meet them. For instance, Reggie, a woman, is heavily invested in writing histories and biographies. She conducts real research and writes books with a scholarly aspect while still engaging readers. I've read all of her books and enjoyed them. Betty has a penchant for writing fantasy. I don't think she envisions herself as the next J.K. Rowling. She leans more towards the talking unicorn type. She's friendly, and her writing seems to be mainly for her own pleasure. Who can argue with that? Bill assumes the role of the group's know-it-all. A little of that goes a long way, but aside from that, he seems all right. Then there's Frank. I felt alarmed the first time I met him, and those alarms have continued to ring in my head ever since. When I met Frank, it was quite clear that I was being introduced to him, rather than the other way around. He looked at me and asked, "So, Andy, what's your profession?" I glanced at my wife, who gave me a slight frown and shook her head. I simply responded, "I'm an engineer." Frank did. He offered a smile, or more of a smirk in return. I mentioned that I had given up attempting to engage with their group, preferring to stay somewhat hidden and unobtrusive, though not exactly out of earshot. When they visit, I'm often in the next room, quietly working or on the back porch with a window open so I can hear their conversation until they forget I'm around. I noticed early on that when Frank talks with Karen, they seem to share private jokes and a connection that makes me uncomfortable. Sometimes he boosts her ego, and other times it's as if he knows her inner thoughts in a way I don't appreciate. He references past conversations that seem to be only between them, and I get the impression that the rest of the group doesn't remember those moments. It's just a feeling, but I'm not fond of it, and I've told her so. She brushes off my concerns, and I've learned not to push the matter. I've made sure she understands my sentiments. The rest is up to her. The group follows a routine during their meetings. After their work session, they relax with some wine and unwind. It was during this time that I realized some of them are merely putting on an act. It happened in the middle of the spring semester, around early March, when the topic shifted to the lifestyles of true writers. Oh, all the famous writers were alcoholics. That's right, they wrote in the mornings and drank in the afternoons and evenings. It relaxes the mind and opens it up to new ideas. Then, in the mornings, their creative thoughts start flowing, and they begin to write. In fact, the truly accomplished writers all experienced romantic relationships. That's what truly motivated them. That's what Frank was saying. Thanks for sharing, Frank. I'm starting to understand where you're coming from. That's when Karen's words hit me like a punch in the gut. Oh, absolutely. It's the intensity and the thrill of the unknown. The excitement of keeping it all hidden from everyone else. That's where the genuine inspiration is found. Some of them chuckled, while others didn't. So I convinced myself it was just a jest, yet I kept an ear on their conversation for the rest of the evening. Maybe we should all have a wild night of passion sometime, and then we'll each write the next great American novel. That came from Bill. I couldn't quite figure out if he meant it humorously or not. Character flaws don't serve as the basis for exceptional writing. What truly builds outstanding stories are qualities like humanity, empathy, and confronting the mysteries of the unknown. I mentioned before that I liked Betty. Unforgettable stories are about overcoming challenges, striving for greatness despite all odds, and leaving the world in a better state than it was before. Well, perhaps if you conjure the right enchantment, we can avoid all the hassle. That was that jerk Frank again. To their disgrace, some in the group seemed to find that amusing. I'm not so sure Betty did, and I had a hunch Reggie didn't either. They carried on talking about writer drinking habits and affairs, and I continued to eavesdrop without giving anything away. Then I caught an intriguing part of their conversation. I overheard Frank whisper something about Karen, and it wasn't just about writing. There was something deeper in his tone, something more intimate. It sent a chill down my spine,